The story begins with three students, Takashi, Rei, and Hisashi, fighting a horde of flesh-hungry zombies on the roof of their campus. As they make their way to the astrology platform, Rei attacks one of the zombies with a javelin, but it has no effect, and the monster easily overpowers her. Hisashi quickly saves Rei before it can bite her, and they escape. But how did zombies suddenly overrun a regular high school? Stick around and find out. We transition to a few hours ago, where Takashi is brooding after being dumped by his childhood crush. The girl, Saya, tells him that he shouldn't skip class, or he'll get distracted from school and end up being left behind. She realizes there is no point in wasting her time and goes to class. Takashi sees several gym teachers approach a strange person at the gate. One of them tries to force him to leave, but is bitten and dies from blood loss. His fellow staff tries to tend to him, but he bites Hayashi, the hot teacher, and the other two teachers run away in panic. Takashi, who saw the incident, rushes to Rei's class to warn her of the danger. Takashi barges into the class, surprising everyone. He grabs Rei and tells her they should leave while he explains the situation to his friend. She refuses to comply, and he ends up slapping her to get her attention. Hisashi and Rei listen to Takashi's story and leave the classroom. Hisashi grabs some weapons, just in case Takashi's story ends up being true, and Rei says she can call her dad, since he's a cop. However, Hisashi says that he doesn't need a weapon since he is a black belt in karate. Rei tries to call her father through the police line, but it's unavailable, which rarely happens. The school intercom turns on and the person speaking through it tells all the students that violence has occurred on campus, and that all students should evacuate. However, the speaker suddenly starts screaming, and it seems he's under attack. As the man screams, Hirano crawls out of his classroom, and Saya tells him that the two are leaving the school. Students all over the school panic and try to escape, creating a stampede as desperate students flee. Hisashi tells Takashi that they can escape through the principal's office. On the way, they encounter Wakasaka, their modern Japanese teacher, who has been bitten. Rai stabs him with her javelin, but he still survives even though it was aimed at the heart. Hisashi grabs him and tells Rei to pull out the javelin, and tries to break his neck, but is unable to due to the monster's unnatural strength. Wakasaka bites Hisashi, and Takashi kills Wakasaka by hitting him in the head with a baseball bat. The three watch as the monsters easily overwhelm the other students. Hisashi then suggests going to the astrology platform on the roof to be safe. When they reach the roof, they see the whole city in chaos. They soon see the SDF, Special Defense Forces, helicopters flying in to assess the damage and deal with the threat. Rei tries to get their attention, but Hisashi tells them they're not here for rescue operations. In the school library, Misuzu and Toshimi are running together when Toshimi is captured by a zombie. They overpower her attempts and she begs Misuzu to save her, but instead, she kicks her to save herself. Unfortunately, she doesn't notice three zombies behind her and is subsequently killed. Everyone is panicking and many lives are lost. They fight their way to the observatory and manage to put up a barricade to protect themselves. However, Hisashi begins to feel the effects of Wakasaka's bite and throws up. He begs Takashi to push him off the ledge so he doesn't die as a zombie. Takashi agrees, but Rei is emotionally hurt and tries to stop him from doing so. He doesn't listen, however, and bashes his dead friend's head in to save Rei. Rei is still shocked by Hisashi's death, and is angry Takashi saved her. She said she'd rather be bitten by Hisashi than live on. Takashi tries to assure her that he killed Hisashi in self-defense, but Rei angrily retorts that he must have done it because he secretly hated Hisashi for going out with her. He apologizes to Rei for bothering her, and says he's going to fight the zombies on his own. Rei stops him, realizing that Takashi is about to die of his own accord, and tearfully apologizes for her words. She begs him to stay with her. Takashi hugs Rei and thinks to himself that on the day it all ended, he killed his best friend and held the girl he loved for the first time in his life. Meanwhile, the surviving students scream as zombies chase them down a hallway. Saya and Hirano watch as they flee and attempt to survive on their own. Hirano asks Saya where they are going and suggests they go to the staff room. Saya stops and asks him if he wants to die or live. Saya points towards a balcony, where other students who had the same idea as Hirano were begging the teachers to let them in. Unfortunately, zombies walk out and attack the students. Saya reaffirms her desire to live, and so they move on. On the platform of the observatory, Rei and Takashi mourn their friend. Rei asks Takashi for his phone, and tells him that even though the emergency line is busy, her father gave her a special number that should only be used in an emergency. She punches in the number and joins her father. However, he thinks the caller is Takashi, and because of the poor service, can't recognize his daughter's voice. He yells that the city is in a panic and they need to get out immediately. Gunshots are fired and the line goes dead. Rei begins to break down in tears because she's worried about her father. Back in the school corridors, Hirano asks Saya if she has her phone, and suggests she call the police. However, because she's a goody two-shoes honor student, she says she didn't bring it. She also tells him that others have probably done the same, but they haven't heard a siren yet. He then suggests that they call the SDF, but she tells him that they are probably in the same situation. One of the zombies find the duo, and they run away. However, Saya is upset that she's stuck with dead weight since Kamiro ran away during the panic. In the nurse's office, a student sees his friend, Akata, returning to life. He panics and grabs an IV pole, chopping off Akata's head and apologizing for doing so. Shizuka, the school nurse, now somewhat aware of the situation, tells herself that she cannot contact the police or fire department, and then tries to gather medicinal supplies. She also deduces that people who are bitten cannot be saved. Suddenly, several zombies break into the medical office and attack the duo. The student tries to stop them but is quickly overpowered. He asks her to run, but she is too shocked and cannot even remember his name, much to his surprise. As Shizuka is about to become zombie food, a girl called Siko, captain of the kendo club, pulls up and saves her. She introduces herself to the dying boy and asks for his name, and he introduces himself as Kazu. She praises and thanks him for protecting the nurse, and asks if she could spare him the pain of becoming a zombie, so his friends and family wouldn't see him like that. He agrees, and because she desires to protect his pride, she brings her wooden sword down on his head, killing him. Meanwhile, in the school workshops, Saya gathers some workshop tools that they could use as weapons to defend themselves. Hirano picks up a nail. Hirano's personality suddenly changed to a more serious tone, and he began to analyze the nail gun. Because he likes guns, he discovers the nail gun is about the same size as an older assault rifle, and quickly modifies it with some workshop tools to make it more usable. The zombies suddenly break in and attack Saya, but Hirano saves her with his makeshift nail gun, and together they make their escape. This man is an American by heart. On the rooftops, Takashi and Rei fend off the zombies with a high-pressure water hose, and then make their way into the main building, fighting zombies along the way. While inside, Rei suggests Takashi calls his parents, but he assures her they're probably fine, and will call them later. However, he was secretly frightened and was also worried about his mother. Elsewhere, Shizuka tells Siko to go to the staff room because faculty members keep their car keys there. However, they are unable to move quickly because Shizuka's skirt is a hindrance, so Siko rips it apart so the nurse could move quicker. Meanwhile, Saya is throwing a wet rag at a zombie. Hirano asks her what she is doing, and she answers by throwing another wet rag on a nearby locker. The zombie hears the noise and bangs its head on the locker. She determines that the zombies do not feel pain, but only react to sound. However, some zombies notice the commotion and approach the two students. Hirano has already run out of ammo, and Saya screams in a panic as the zombies approach. Takashi, Rei, Siko, and Shizuka hear the screams and run toward the source of the sound. One of the zombies begins to attack Saya, but she throws some trophies at it, which don't deal any damage. In a last-ditch attempt to save herself, she grabs a drill and impales its head, all the while screaming for her mother. Luckily for her, Rei, Siko, and Takashi are more competent than Hirano, and they defeat the zombies. They all introduce themselves, but Saya can't mentally handle the situation, so she breaks down and cries. Later on, the 6 survivors decide to take the bus and think of an escape route. Takashi then tells everyone about the plan, telling them that he will make sure their families are okay, and then find somewhere safe. Suddenly, the news comes and the survivors watch in horror as the city is plagued by zombies. The survivors are shocked to learn that the zombie pandemic has taken over the city. However, it appears that the news station is hesitant to go too deep into the issue. Takashi is unhappy the news isn't saying more, but Saya quickly adds that it's because they don't want to cause a panic, as that would lead to anarchy. Anarchy will make it hard for the government to defuse the zombie situation. The international news stations go deeper into the situation. America, France, and Italy are in a state of panic, while Britain has maintained order for the time being. Several world leaders discuss deploying tactical warheads. The world is on fire, and this is just the beginning. The survivors try to make sense of what has just happened, but Rei is busy overdosing on copium, and thinks everything will go back to normal. However, Saya hands her a reality check, and tells her things could only get worse. Logically assessing the situation, Siko decides to try to find out the status of their families, and suggests they work together as a team to increase their chances of survival. They decide to make their way to the parking lot and use a school bus to escape. On their way, they meet a group of side characters about to become zombie food, so the main characters swoop in and eliminate the threats. They then ask the students to follow them if they want to survive. After encountering another group of zombies, Takashi decides to test Saya's theory on avoiding the zombies, based on how they can only react to sound. He stands among them for a moment, and the theory is confirmed. He throws a shoe in a random direction, and the zombies become distracted, giving Siko the opportunity to help him open the doors for the other survivors. However, one of the survivors does a side character thing by accidentally making a loud sound, which grabs the attention of all the zombies in the nearby area. Because of this, they have to fight through a horde on their way to the bus, and the life cycle of some of the side characters ends. They keep fighting and end up making it to the bus. As teammates prepare to drive off, they spot another group of survivors approaching. Rei recognizes one of the teachers, Koichi Shido, and is hesitant about letting him on board. Shido directs his group to get on the bus. However, one of them trips on thin air and breaks his ankle. He begs Shido for help, but Shido isn't having any of it and kicks his student's face in. He tells the student that only the strongest survive and abandons him on the spot. If you're still watching at this point, type F in the comments for the poor student. Shizuka steps on the gas and they drive off, running over the zombies like it's zombie highway, and breaking open the gates of the school like she's in a Fast and Furious movie. At that moment, Shido tries to make himself the leader of the entire group, and Rei tells Takashi that he'll regret saving him. They drive past their city and watch as smoke clouds rise from the buildings. Everywhere is destroyed and it's a sorry mess. Meanwhile, one of the students randomly tries to pick a fight with Takashi, but Rei intervenes. Shido commends their teamwork, but then uses the opportunity to suggest that they make him the leader to prevent conflict. His lackeys give him a standing ovation, and he elects himself as leader based on a majority vote. Rei becomes defiant about Shido appointing himself as the leader and runs off the bus. As Takashi goes after her, a bus filled with zombies crashes and traps them in a tunnel. Siko tries to save them, but Takashi says they'll meet with the other survivors later. Suddenly, Takashi is attacked by a zombie motorcyclist, but they defeat him. Takashi and Rei then find its motorcycle and head toward the city. Episode 4. The next morning, a fighter plane is taking pictures of the wrecked city. We then see that Rei and Takashi are navigating the city on a motorcycle. The night before, Rei is still optimistic about being rescued, but Takashi tells her that they won't be saved by anyone, given the circumstances. She gets angry at him for being too blunt, but while they're arguing, some zombies start to creep up on them. However, they drive away. Meanwhile, the rest of the A-team is on the bus and are trying to get past a military checkpoint. It is very hectic as military personnel are screaming that civilians should stay in their cars and are also fighting zombies. Two of the fodder students are scared about what is going on, but then Shido goes to console them. He has a creepy look on his face. It seems that Siko is suspicious of him too. Meanwhile, around midnight, Takashi and Rei are still driving around the desolate city. There's no one in the city because everyone has either died or has just run away. Soon after, they find a police car and are excited because they think they could get some help. However, the person at the wheel is dead due to a car accident. Rei goes into the car to look for supplies they could use and finds a handgun, a baton and some handcuffs. Takashi tries to get a feel for the gun, and is surprised to see it only has 5 bullets. However, Rei brings him a few more, which she took from the body of the other dead officer. She's familiar with guns because her father was a police officer. With the motorcycle running out of gas, the two pull into a gas station, but Takashi realizes that he spent the last of his money on juice. This sets up an argument where Rei tells Takashi that he sucks for no good reason, and Takashi yells at her for comparing him to Hisashi, her dead boyfriend. They don't argue for long, and Takashi decides to go into the store to check the cash register for money. While he breaks the cash register, Takashi hears Rei screaming, and he goes outside to find a crazy man holding Rei hostage. He threatens to make her his woman by force because he wants to survive the apocalypse. That doesn't make sense, but okay. Takashi tries to defuse the situation, but the man has a knife to Rei's neck and is handling her roughly, so he doesn't do anything rash. He is instructed to fill up the motorcycle with the money he took from the register and hand over his keys and the bat. Takashi throws the bat on the ground, which alerts nearby zombies. He tries to negotiate the situation again, but the man threatens to kill them both. At this moment, Takashi runs up to the man and points the gun at the man's chest. The man is scared and asks him not to shoot, so he doesn't set fire to the gasoline. However, Takashi says he'd rather that happen than to let anyone take his gun. Real smooth. He then shoots the man, who is at this point screaming and writhing in pain. Rei is angry and wants revenge, but Takashi says she should let him be as the zombies will be attracted to the noise. They leave on the motorcycle, and karma does its thing to the man. They keep on riding to the next day, and Takashi tells Rei that they'd encounter those sort of scenarios as time goes on. As they cross a bridge, a fighter plane flies by and takes a picture of them as the sun rises. If the world was ending, and you and your crush were navigating a desolate city filled with flesh-eating zombies, what would you do?